Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program, and these are tonight's top stories. Algiers calls for a decisive roadmap to strengthen bilateral relations with Turkey as both nations prioritize defense cooperation and political alignment. Coming up next, Zionist bombardment targets civilian shelters in Gaza as UN warns of system collapse, and Hamas vows intensified resistance amid the escalating crisis. Also ahead, Morocco cracks down on protests against Zionist arms shipments, while authorities shutter universities fearing mass student demonstrations. And Trump pushes for Russia-Ukraine deal as Putin weighs 30-day truce, and Kiev rejects Crimea concessions. Stay with us, full reports up next. Welcome back to the program. First up in our news, Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune met Monday with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and his delegation. The meeting was attended by top officials such as the Principal Private Secretary to the President, Boualem Boualem, and Minister of State and Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf, according to the presidency. The talks focused on strengthening cooperation. And after his meeting with the President, Fidan announced President Tebboune will soon visit Turkey to lead a high-level strategic meeting.
I was received by the Algerian president, to whom I conveyed the greetings of our President of the Republic. This year, we will host President Abdelmadjid Tebboune within the framework of the high-level strategic meeting. We see that Algeria has achieved significant economic development under the leadership of President Tebboune.
For his part, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf called what he called a clear and ambitious path forward in the relationship. Speaking at a high-level planning meeting in Algiers, Attaf stressed that both nations must work to overcome, in his words, all obstacles to reach their strategic cooperation goals.
From this perspective, as we convene once again within the framework of this unique and exceptional mechanism, it is imperative that we keep in mind the qualitative priorities and quantitative goals set forth by Presidents Abdelmadjid Tebboune and Recep Tayyip Erdogan. These objectives are grounded in an approach marked by rigor, clarity and ambition, whether it concerns the volume of trade exchanges, the level of mutual investments or cooperation across the various economic, social and cultural sectors represented here today. We are called upon to overcome all obstacles, no matter how small or large, in order to achieve the strategic objectives entrusted to us.
On his turn, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan called Algeria one of Ankara's most important African partners. Addressing the Algerian-Turkish Planning Commission, Fidan pledged to expand cooperation across all fields, singling out defense industry collaboration as having particularly strong potential.
In parallel with our visits to Algeria, we also host delegations from Algeria in our country. For example, the Defense Industry Cooperation Meeting was held in Turkey from April 12th to 14th, during which field visits were conducted. Through today's meeting, we have elevated our bilateral mechanism to a strategic level, and our Algerian brothers have demonstrated a strong willingness to cooperate in the field of defense industries as well. Although this sector was not on the main agenda of our current meeting, I believe it holds great promise and significance, and it will undoubtedly play an important role in the future of relations between our two countries.
Shifting focus to the deadly strikes across Gaza now, which have left at least 20 Palestinians dead, including multiple women and children, according to local medical sources. The attacks hit homes and displaced camps in multiple locations. In Khan Younis, 5 family members were killed when their home was struck, while 4 others died in a tent bombing. Further south, rescue workers recovered the bodies of 2 children from a drone strike in Rafah. Gaza City saw 9 killed when strikes hit tents at a sports club. The violence comes as humanitarian conditions continue to deteriorating across the besieged territory. For its part, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza reported 39 martyrs and 62 wounded within the past 24 hours alone. The death toll from the ongoing Zionist war has now reached 51,240, with at least 116,931 injured since the resumption of attacks on March 18. 1,864 Palestinians have been killed and 4,890 wounded. On a related note, the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency is sounding the alarm, warning Gaza's humanitarian crisis is reaching catastrophic levels amid ongoing bombardment and severe aid restrictions. UNRWA reports women and children, who make up most of Gaza's population, are bearing the brunt of the suffering, with critical supplies nearing exhausted, the agency is urgently renewing calls for an immediate ceasefire. This as conditions continue deteriorating in what aid workers describe as one of the world's worst humanitarian disasters. And speaking of humanitarian situation, Palestinians with kidney failure now face near impossible odds, battling severe shortages of medicine, electricity, and safe transport just to reach life-saving dialysis. Each journey is a gamble in the besieged enclave, where even basic medical care has become a luxury. More on this with Salman Asib.
Under the shadow of war, Mohammed Atiyah, a kidney failure patient, is pushed by his son through the destructions of Gaza streets. They head to Shifa Hospital in the northern Rimmel neighborhood, one of the last medical facilities still operating amidst the war. A father of 6, Atiyah used to undergo dialysis 3 times a week. But now, like many others, he is forced to make do with fewer sessions.
كنا سابقا في الأيام الوضع الطبيعي.
Before the war, I did dialysis 3 times a week for 4 hours. Now it's only 2 sessions a week, sometimes only an hour and a half, just enough to keep you from dying, just enough to survive until the next session.
Dr. Ghazil Yazidi, head of the nephrology and dialysis department at Shifa Hospital, explains the dire reality for kidney failure patients in Gaza.
A patient is supposed to undergo dialysis 3 times a week, each session lasting 4 hours. However, due to the increasing number of patients and the shortage of available machines, we perform 2 sessions instead of 3. This obviously leads to complications such as increased toxin levels, fluid buildup in the lungs and heart, and dangerously high potassium levels.
More than 680 kidney failure patients are struggling to survive in Gaza, where basic needs like pure mineral water, vital necessity for their treatment, have become increasingly rare and unaffordable.
As kidney failure patients, we need pure mineral water, but it's almost impossible to find. And if it's available, it's far too expensive for us to afford.
The difficulty doesn't end with the lack of water. Transportation costs to get to the hospitals have skyrocketed, adding another layer of suffering for those in need of life-saving treatment.
I've been undergoing dialysis for 3 months now. The car we take from the Sabra neighborhood to get here costs 60 shekels. No one pays for us. The situation is very difficult.
The genocidal assault on Gaza has shattered its healthcare system. Hospitals are overwhelmed, medical supplies are dangerously scarce, and dozens of facilities have been rendered inoperable by relentless airstrikes. For patients like Atiyah and Kamal, surviving this crisis isn't just about fighting illness, it's about surviving the war.
Hamas is pushing back against occupation proposals to extend sovereignty over parts of the West Bank. In a strongly worded statement, the group condemned what it called a colonial land grab designed to erase Palestinian rights. Hamas is demanding immediate international action to stop what it describes as Israel's expansionist agenda, while calling on Palestinians to ramp up resistance efforts.
The recent Israeli minister's calls to impose sovereignty over the occupied West Bank reflect ongoing aggressive settlement policies aimed at erasing the Palestinian cause. These statements demonstrate a colonial mindset, violate international law and UN resolutions, and demand urgent international action to hold Israel accountable and to stop its expansionist practices. We in the Hamas movement call upon our steadfast and resilient people to escalate all forms of resistance, to continue the uprising and confront the occupation forces and settler militias until the will of the occupier and its fascist leaders is broken and their plans for Judaization are defeated.
Meanwhile, in Yemen, Houthi groups claim they've carried out new drone attacks targeting sites in occupation's Allied region and a U.S. aircraft carrier in the Red Sea. Military spokesman الإشهارية identified the drones as locally made models. The announcement comes as Houthi media reports that at least 42 casualties from U.S. retaliatory strikes near Sana'a, including hits on a busy market district.
نفذ سلاح الجو المسير.
The Yemeni Armed Forces Air Force launched 2 operations targeting key Israeli sites, one in the occupied Askara area using a Yafa drone, and another on a military site in al-Rashrash with a Samad-1 drone. Additionally, 2 joint operations were carried out. The first, involving missiles and drones, targeted the USS Truman and its escort vessels in the northern Red Sea. The second, coordinated by naval, air and missile forces, struck the same carrier and warships in the Gulf of Aden and Arabian Sea.
In other regional news, in Morocco, protests erupted in Tangier and Casablanca as hundreds rallied against ships carrying military supplies bound for the Zionist entity. Demonstrators organized by pro-Palestinian groups accused their government of complicity in the genocide in Gaza. Chants filled the streets as activists demanded Morocco block such shipments from its ports.
We came today to say, all Moroccans witness. The world needs to witness. All the free people, all the Moroccan people have one word, one voice, all of which unites because they reject normalization, reject this copycat and reject everything that could normalize from near or far, and they will continue in all the scenes. We came today to teach them that we are innocent from all these official procedures. Millions of Moroccan people have came here and they have already submitted a referendum about the protests of this year and a half, rejecting this regime which is allowing all these ships to become tools for killing our brothers in Palestine.
In response, Moroccan security forces cracked down on anti-normalization protests in Tangier and Casablanca. Demonstrators were met with heavy police and gendarmerie presence as they marched toward the ports, where 2 U.S. cargo ships were docked, reportedly carrying F-35 parts and military supplies for the Zionist occupation. Protesters described the cargo as lethal and destined for Gaza, calling the shipment a direct link to the ongoing genocide war. In Morocco still, student outrage is growing after authorities shut down a university in Meknes to block a pro-Palestine event. The National Union of Moroccan Students slammed the move as repression by the Makhzen regime, condemning the 3-day closure and suspension of classes. In a Saturday statement, the union vowed to defend academic freedom and resist what it called an attempt to hijack university spaces. To another topical development, Donald Trump is turning up the pressure on Russia and Ukraine, urging both sides to cut a peace deal this week. In a post on Truth Social Monday, U.S. President dangled the prospect of prosperous business dealings with U.S. if they agree to a truce. It comes days after he warned that Washington could shift its focus if the war drags on. For his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's open to a 30-day pause in strikes on Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, but with a catch. In a state TV interview Monday, Putin warned Moscow will target those sites if they're used for military purposes. The cautious nod comes as winter attacks on Ukraine's energy grid ramp up.
As we have always said, we look positively at any peace initiatives. We hope that the representatives of the Kyiv regime will also feel the same way. However, we have seen the initial reaction. I think everyone has noticed. There was a statement published according to which our proposal was seen as a game with fates, with people's lives and so on. But apparently there was someone smarter there who suggested, most likely from foreign overseers, that rejecting such initiatives is a losing position for the Kyiv regime, and they quickly agreed.
From the other side, a senior Ukrainian official is pushing back on talk of any compromise over Crimea. Ukrainian presidential advisor called Ukraine's territorial integrity non-negotiable, denying reports of Black Channel discussions with Russia. The firm stance comes as Kiev works on shore up Western support and shut down speculation over potential diplomatic concessions. In another story, the US and Iran are inching closer to a breakthrough. Officials made notable progress in a second round of talks in Rome, with upcoming meetings set to zero in on technical issues like uranium enrichment limits. Tehran's foreign ministry says the goal is lifting what it calls unjustified sanctions, insisting any deal must bring real economic relief and clear, enforceable guarantees. Russian President Vladimir Putin has sealed a 20-year strategic pact with Iran, formalizing a sweeping cooperation deal initially signed in January with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. State media say the agreement now ratified strengthens political and economic ties as both nations face mounting Western sanctions, signaling a deeper alignment in the face of global pressure. And now let's catch up on more international news stories and the news in brief with Zahar Farjani.
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Monday that Russia and the US agree Ukraine's NATO membership is unlikely. He reaffirmed Moscow's openness to a peaceful resolution to the Ukraine crisis, but stressed that joining NATO poses a threat to Russian interests. China has imposed sanctions on several US lawmakers and NGO leaders, accusing them of outrageous behavior concerning Hong Kong. The Chinese Foreign Ministry announced the decision on Monday. The Sudanese army announced that 33 civilians were killed and dozens injured in artillery shelling by the Rapid Support Forces on Al-Fashir, Western Sudan. In a statement on Sunday, the army condemned the indiscriminate attacks on residential areas as a clear violation of humanitarian law. Pope Francis, a central figure of the Catholic Church, died Monday morning at age 88 after his fourth and longest hospitalization since becoming Pope in 2013. As per church rules, a 9-day funeral will be held, followed by a 15 to 20-day period to convene a conclave.
Moving on to a different matter, Burniat, an industrial hub between Assam and Meghalaya in northeast India, has been ranked the world's most polluted metropolitan area in the 2024 Air IQ report. Official data reveals a staggering 100% rise in respiratory cases since 2022, highlighting the severe public health crisis in the region. Yasin Rukti has more on this report.
Amid this scrubby, smoke-choked landscape, a thick toxic cloud hangs in the air, a heavy blend of humidity, airborne particles and black factory smoke. This is Byronhat, a small town with big pollution problems. Barely 2 years old, Sumaya was rushed to hospital last March, struggling with serious respiratory complications, a direct result of air pollution.
She has been suffering from breathing difficulties, chest congestion and cough for almost a year, but the situation has worsened recently.
Sumaya is not alone. the air in Bayernhat has become toxic. For the town's residents, it's a daily health hazard, causing persistent coughs, eye irritation, skin rashes, and serious respiratory illnesses.
In most of the cases,
in nearly 90% of the cases we see, both children and adults suffer from respiratory problems, chronic coughs, rhinitis, wheezing. It's become routine.
cases will fall towards respiratory problems.
But if a child does not respond adequately,
If a child doesn't respond well to treatment and needs oxygen or ventilation repeatedly, they risk permanent lung damage and in the long run, even multi-organ failure.
The impact extends far beyond health. Bayernhat's once fertile fields are now coated in smog and ash. Crops are failing and farmers are losing their livelihoods.
Previously, there was only one factory nearby, but because of the new factory, we can no longer grow anything, like nuts or betel leaves. We can't even stay outdoors anymore.
Year-round, Bayernhat's air quality remains poor. Despite rising alarms from both health professionals and the local community, it's part of a much larger crisis in India, where rapid industrial expansion is outpacing environmental protections, choking towns both big and small. In Bayernhat, the air may be free, but it's far from safe.
And finally, before we wrap up, in Egypt, families mark the Shem al-Nassim Spring Festival, in which they gather to share salt-cured fish dating back to pharaonic times, a powerfully flavored ritual that connects modern Egyptians to their 3,000-year heritage. Sophia Kentari has more.
Meet fasik, fermented, salted herring that signals the arrival of spring with a scent you can't ignore. Fasik is at the heart of Shem al-Nassim, a spring festival dating back to the pharaonic times, when ancient Egyptians welcomed the season of renewal with sun, flowers, and salted fish.
The ancient Egyptians used to collect salted fish from the shores. They preserved it in clay pots so it would last all year. Shem al-Nassim marks the equal day and night, an ancient celebration that lives on.
Once a year delicacy, fasik has now migrated from seasonal treat to year-round favorite.
Today, herring has become a staple food. With safer packaging and processing, it keeps its nutritional value and taste. Of course, it's still most popular during holidays.
Prepared from gray mullet, salted and fermented for days, fasik is a cultural ritual. Egyptians see it as a living link to their heritage, passed from one generation to the next.
Fasik and herring have a taste that truly whets the appetite. They bring families together not only during Shem al-Nassim but on holidays throughout the year.
Flavors are bold, the aroma unforgettable, and yes, the meal demands hydration.
You can't have Shem al-Nassim without herring. It goes hand in hand with onions and lemons. It's a heavy meal, so you've got to drink a lot of water and plenty of tea. But it's a beautiful tradition for us all.
Fasik might be salty, pungent, and not for the faint of heart. But to Egyptians, it's the flavor of spring, a taste of tradition, and a celebration of life, rebirth, and belonging.
And that brings us to the end of our news program for tonight. For more updates, you can always check our social media platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. Thank you for tuning in, and good night.